All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Consistency Corner podcast. I'm really pumped for my conversation today with Rebecca Caldwell, the founder of Three Groves. And Rebecca and I connected in a networking group, which has been one of my focuses for this past quarter because cool people bring cool people together on the internet. And I was in a networking group with Mariah Magazine, who was a podcast guest. I can't remember if her episode is aired before or after this, but she brought together a lot of cool people, Rebecca being one of them. And she and I connected on her love of marketing, but the fact that she is a marketing measurement and paid advertising specialist and strategist. And measurement and analytics and data is like the bread and butter of what we do. We need that information. Yes, we can go on gut instinct. Yes, we can go on what we think is going to work, but data really needs to drive those decisions. And so I love that she helps business owners set up analytics, figure out what you should be measuring. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is UTMs, which if you've never heard of UTMs, like get ready to be mind blown. And if you've heard of them, but you're like, oh, I'm not really sure how to use this or what this is or if I should care about it, it's the best kept secret on the internet that really should not be a secret. So Rebecca's going to break it down for us today. I actually reached out to her because I was like, hey, I understand this, but I don't know if I understand it well enough to explain it. And she's like, oh my gosh, I actually wrote a blog post about this. I'm like, let's have a conversation. So Rebecca, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I think it's something everyone should know about.
Yes. And we were talking, before we hit record that I discovered UTMs when I was working in corporate and trying to teach myself marketing and figure all this out and understand digital marketing. And I remembered Googling it and being like, okay, I understand why we do this. I understand that it's helpful, but oh, it seems really complicated and really technical. And from what I'm understanding from you, it doesn't have to be, right?
No, not at all. I think that's it. It does, it doesn't have to be complicated. We can keep things
Yeah.
simple and still have really, really useful data.
Yes. And I think, that's one of the things that with digital marketing, the tech piece, sometimes people overcomplicate it. And I think for a while that was like a gatekeeping thing of like, we're going to overcomplicate this because we understand all the tech and we want clients to think that they need us. And that the very first time I started learning about SEO, I was like, whoa, eyes glazed. I don't know what we're talking about. But then when I finally met some shocking, amazing female SEO specialists, Mariah being one of them, my friend Nina Gibson being another, and they started explaining it in a way that made sense, I was like, oh, this isn't so complex. And so I certainly appreciate people who are willing to have conversations about these technical things and explain it to us like we're maybe first graders so that we can be business owners who can make informed decisions about our next steps in business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're right. There is kind of some gatekeeping with tech, but we don't have to do that. We can just share our knowledge. And even if you feel like, oh, I'm not really techie, I don't know how to do those things, well, just slow down a minute and let me see if I can explain it to you so that you do get it. And I think a lot of times we're afraid maybe to ask questions that might be silly, but there aren't silly questions. There
Yes.
really
I would say
aren't.
I feel like that's one of my strengths as a human. I'm not afraid to ask a silly question. Like I will say in a meeting to somebody, could you please explain this to me like I'm in second grade? Like I'm not afraid to do that because I don't know. And if I don't know what I don't know, I can't ever learn and get better. So, all right. Well, before we get into UTMs and all of those things, can you just tell us a little bit more about your business, about Three Groves? How did you get started as an entrepreneur and how long have you been doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started my business after a life experience that allowed me to go back to college as an adult. So I had been in retail management for a while, and then I was able to go get my degree in accounting. And I started my business for the things that most of us probably started their business for. I wanted time freedom, and I didn't want a cap on my income. So I just was like, okay, what skills do I have, and how can I begin to make money? And I started out like a lot of people in the online industry and did a little bit of social media marketing management and then a little bit of general VA task. And then when I realized that paid advertising allowed me to marry my love of numbers and patterns that I've had since a very small child, I was all in. So as I began learning about that, I realized how important it is to be able to measure your marketing, whether it's organic or you're spending money on it, so that you can make more informed decisions and really do the best thing for your business. So down the rabbit hole I went, and here we are today. And so I started taking clients in late 2018, early 2019, and I transitioned solely, mostly to paid ads in 2021. And really during 2023, I decided, okay, mission educate all the humans about measuring their marketing so that they can keep more of their resources, time and money.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I have seen so many people invest in ads when they're not ready because they don't have data. Like they're just like, oh, let me give you a bucket of money and see if that makes me successful. Well, it can if we've done the pre work. And like I can get on my soapbox about that, which is one of the reasons, quite honestly, that as a service provider, I don't offer paid ads because I want to help you get to the place where we can bring in a specialist like Rebecca or somebody else who, focuses on paid ads, because I've seen, unfortunately, people start investing in ads when they're not ready and waste a ton of money, which I hate to see. Like it makes me feel bad for people, right?
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place for like spending money on ads. Do you have more money than you have time? Cool. Let's use your money to test, but let's do it in a really methodical way. And I think sometimes that's not what happens. Whatever, whoever's handed the bucket of money and then, well, like we tried some things, but I think if you're going to use your money to test, you have to be really methodical and like record your marketing experiments and continue to iterate on the things that are working. So I think that's like a whole different type of advertising than just like, okay, cool. I've scaled my business. I know what resonates. I'm ready to run, like pour fuel on the fire with running ads. I think those are two totally separate things. So I agree. I
Yeah.
think there's like a time and a place, and you got to gauge that for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So we're talking about UTMs as a tool to measure things, understand things. For somebody who's like, what is a UTM? Could you just explain it in like kindergarten terms?
Yes. Okay. So UTM parameters are special codes that help people who have websites track where their visitors are coming from. The reason that we want to track where our visitors are coming from to our website is because generally that's where our conversions happen. So the UTM links are things that are added to the end of the website URL. Have you ever clicked on a link and seen www.sample.com with a question mark and a bunch of gobbledygook at the end of it? That's the UTM parameters that company has chosen to use. So the term UTM came about. It was originally developed by a company called Urchin Software Corporation, and it stood for Urchin Tracking Model. And then Google bought the technology, and so now we just use the term UTM for any kind of system that allows us to track traffic to our website.
Yeah. Okay. So I think one of my big questions that I ask clients when we get into data and understanding what's going on, first of all, is do you have Google Analytics set up?
Mm-hmm.
Which, it kind of like gives me the heebie-jeebies how many people say no. So how is UTMs different from Google Analytics for somebody who's like, I'm a little
Yeah,
queasy on
they actually work in tandem. So you need Google Analytics installed on your website to be able to read and track your UTM parameters. So those parameters pull into Google Analytics, and then you can see them inside of your reporting inside of Google Analytics.
Okay. And we talked a little bit about the gatekeeping. Why do you think that no one is talking about this? If it's such a critical tool and it's free, like why are more marketers not sharing this, do you think?
Yeah, so I think that you nailed it earlier when you said something about the gatekeeping. But I also think maybe people aren't talking about it because it is so simple and it is free. And so it seems like, oh, how useful can this be? It's free, And so I think it's not like shiny or sexy or flashy or like new. It's just something like a really basic, simple thing that we could use to like make really impactful moves in our business. So I think
Yeah. And
sometimes
when we
marketers like shiny things.
yes. Well, when we talk about the like impactful decisions that we could make, I think an example of that is where are you spending your time on content creation? Because if you're kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and posting stuff here and posting stuff there and trying to figure out what works, like it's just a guessing game without tracking tools, right?
100%. I think then you're really leaning on, yes, you have like on platform analytics, but a lot of times, like, those don't tell you the whole picture on purpose.
Mhm.
And then also you're leaning a lot on your gut. And I think it's super important to look at the facts and your feelings, but I think oftentimes our brains tell us things that sometimes maybe aren't true.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to be able to marry the two. Yeah, I want to think about my feelings, but I really want to look at that data so I can ask myself, is this a fact or is this just the way that I'm feeling?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we could probably have a whole separate podcast on this topic, but I want to touch on it for a second is attribution models. And you said that the individual platform will give you information. So, like, Facebook is going to give you information, Pinterest is going to give you information, Google Analytics is going to give you information. This was kind of like a mind blown moment for me when I was learning marketing and someone explained it, that the attribution models and the data in the individual platforms might not all marry up because the platform wants to make their analytics look the best. So, can you maybe, like, because you're so good at explaining this, like, break that down for somebody who's like, huh? What'd you just say, Ruthie?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about that is, this is kind of like tinfoil hattie, but all of those platforms like want to keep you as a user. So they want you to think, oh, the things that I'm doing are working. They're driving my business forward. So, like, specifically with Facebook ads, a lot of times you'll see some over reporting because you've set your like tracking to 1 day click, 7 day view. So you're seeing view through like transactions happening. I think with the attribution model, I like to kind of put them in a box and set them down and then pick one source of truth, one thing that you're going to look at to compare apples to apples. So
Mhm.
for me, a lot of times that's Google Analytics using the events, using UTM links so that when I go to look at what's happening, I have one thing that I'm looking at. Could I look at all the other things maybe as a supplement? Like, I've looked at my report with Google Analytics and use my UTM links when I'm thinking about the marketing campaign that I just did, and I have the facts. And then I think, okay, let me open up Instagram and ask some more questions maybe about the type of content or the specific pieces of content or the hooks of the content. So I think with attribution models, you have to pick like what's going to be my truth going forward and read all your data from that source.
Yeah, and also to understand that all of this stuff works together in concert. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's never going to be, or it's very unlikely to be, one thing that caused the customer to find you, learn about you, and convert with you. Like, it's a lot of different things working together. And so I love what you said about one source of truth, because that way you're not comparing apples to oranges and trying to, like, piece together data that maybe doesn't make sense because it's being presented in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. Like, our marketing strategies aren't silos. They're a holistic thing. We got to look at how are all the pieces working together. We also kind of have to like be okay with that. Maybe we won't have the answer 100% all of the time, but we're looking for that statistical significance.
Yes. Oh, that's so true. And it's all an experiment. It's like, okay, well, we're doing this over here, we're doing this over here, we're doing this over here. What happens if we change one thing? How does the
Mhm.
total results change? And that's one of the reasons that I recommend for clients that we layer in new things one at a time so that we're
Yeah.
not like, oh, I don't know where the results came from.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm all for iterating, but I think iterating in a controlled environment. So I like to think
Mhm.
about the marketing experiments like a scientific experiment. If you're
Mhm.
doing a scientific experiment, you're not going to try a bunch of things because you're not going to change a bunch of variables at one time. So I think when we pair those marketing experiments really closely to like a actual scientific experiment, I think then it becomes a little clearer that we really should only do one thing at a time to see what's
Yeah.
happening.
Okay, so let's break down when we go to set up a UTM. Like, what is the process of creating a UTM link?
Okay, so you can use Google's developer tool to create your UTM links. I recommend doing that because it's going to put all of the like question mark UTM equals things that you need for you. So you open that up. It's a free website. You can find it on the internet. You just Google UTM link creator and you'll find it. There are 5 different ways that you can categorize your content. Only 3 of them are required for the UTM link to track. So I'll explain kind of all of them. The first 3 that are required are your source, and that is to track your source. So think about your platform like Instagram, Facebook, email service provider, things like that. The second one that's required is your medium, to track your medium. So think about your type of traffic. Is it social? Is it email? Is it cost per click if you're using paid advertising? And the third and final thing that's required for your UTM link to track is your campaign. So I use those to track your marketing campaign. So you want to think like the product that you're launching or promoting. There are 2 others that you can use to get really granular if you'd like to. You can use term. You can use that to track keywords. I like to think about this one for placement for myself. So think like stories, call to action, description in your email, or any other identifying factor that you found in your business that you want to keep track of. The last one that you can track is content. And I use this specifically to track like specifics about your content. So think image description or a video description.
Okay. So let's break down source versus medium because I think that can get a little bit confusing
Yeah.
because your source, let's say it's Instagram. Well, the medium is social. So
Yeah.
those are always going to go together, but there's multiple
Mm-hmm.
social media or there's multiple
Yeah.
social sources. So like
Yeah.
medium comes first, right? And then the actual platform for social. Am I explaining that right? Am I
Yeah,
getting
I think the way I think about it is the inverse, but it's exactly the same thing. So I'll just say the way I think about it in case one of them clicks better for the people that are listening. So I think about it like I've picked my source, and then how do I categorize it with my medium?
Okay. Yes. Okay. That makes sense. And so the other mediums could be email. And I'm even thinking about like with email, okay, well, my source in email, it's always going to be Kajabi because that's where I'm sending
Mm-hmm.
emails from. But it could be a automated funnel, or it could
Mm-hmm.
be a one-time campaign, or it could be a link I've given somebody in a freebie swap and they're going to send an email on my behalf. And so I know that the medium is email, but the source is a collaboration partner, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, like, let's take that one. We're going to switch freebies, and I'm going to set up a UTM link to give to you so that you can send it to your humans. You would do in source, it would be like collab or networking or partner swap, whatever you've decided in your business that you're going to call those things. And then my medium would be email. My campaign would be my freebie. So, like maybe MMP, because that's like what I call one of my freebies. And then it would be up to us to decide if we cared to get granular enough to track the term and the content. Generally, when I'm doing a freebie swap, that's enough for me. I don't need to know like that they clicked the second link that you linked to it in your email. But if that was important to you and you wanted to know, you could include those things with the
Yeah.
term and content.
Yeah. I mean, I think the term and content, if you are testing different creatives to figure out which creative resonates with people, what makes people want to click. I remember doing this when I was in corporate and we were, working on running ads for specific products. Like, is it the product shot or is it the lifestyle shot that's going to
Yes.
resonate more with people? And the more we know, the more we can amplify what works versus like throwing away time, energy, or money on things that don't work as well.
Yeah, and I tend to get really granular if I'm in like a launch cycle. So whether that's like a live launch, or you're setting up like your first iteration of an evergreen launch. I'm going to use all of the parameters that I can use, but I'm doing something that I always do, like Instagram stories. I'm probably not going to get as granular. I think the cool thing about the UTM parameters is that like they're so specific to who you are as a human and the business that you're running. If you're like, I don't really care about the granular stuff, cool, throw it in the bin. You don't need it. But if you are like, I need all the info, then use all of the things. I'm like a put the outsides of the puzzle together first kind of girl. So like I need all of the info if it's pertinent to me.
So then once we've put that information on our links, and okay, now we're providing links in email, we're doing links in our stories, we're doing links in Facebook posts, whatever. Where are we going in like reading this data, and how do we start to like digest it and interpret it so that we can use it?
Yeah, so you're going to go into your Google Analytics, and there are options for you to select all of the things so that you can look at them, and you're going to start pulling patterns. I think that's the first thing that you want to do if you're like new to measuring your marketing is before you start asking any really specific questions, just look at it high level. What can I see is working? What do I see? What do I not see that I thought I was going to see? What am I working? Is there anything I'm working really hard on that I don't see showing up here, that I don't see driving traffic? And then once you've answered those questions, you kind of offshoot off of that. Cool. This is what's working. Why is it working? What about it is working? How can I do more of what's working?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And doing more of what's working when you're busy and you're wearing a lot of hats is so incredibly important, because I always tell, everybody, including myself, that you can do anything, you cannot do everything. So
Yeah.
we've got to have a way to kind of distill down what we're going to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about that one of the most important things that you can do is deciding on a naming convention that works for you and then use it consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about why that is so critical and important.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about when we were looking at different data from different types of sources. It's about being able to compare apples to apples. If you're using a consistent source, you can quickly and easily see what is working. There's no like piecemealing of the data together. So I think, like, for an example, if you're live launching and you are using multiple different things in your campaign to call your live launch, yes, you can go and pull a report that pulls it all together, but by just picking one campaign name and using it consistently, you remove some of those like options for error because you're pulling one thing, you're looking at one thing. Goes back to that like one source of truth, all of those tied together. Having a naming convention for your launches, having a naming convention for like consistent marketing um, allows you to see quickly what's working.
Yeah, and I think a naming convention can get confusing because your business is going to look different than everybody else's business. So it's like, well, what naming convention should I use? Well, it's what makes sense to you. And I'll give an example for a client of mine that is in e-commerce and sells luxury home goods. And based upon her personal brand, we kind of have five main campaign themes, right? And these are evergreen. We could talk about any of them through any time throughout the year, other than holiday, which is like its whole other thing.
Yeah.
So our campaign is going to be like cocktails or recipes. And then we could go into the individual keywords or the content specifics, and we could get down and distill it to like a specific product. Because here's the thing, I know that there's a product that might make sense in both the wine theme and the home entertaining theme. But which one are we like really creating content on? And all that data helps us understand which content resonates, what we should do more of. And then when we go to look at our planning for next year, hey, maybe the cocktail campaign like didn't really do anything for us. So let's not spend time creating content around that, you know?
Yeah, I also think like in that instance, the way that you've explained it, you're also seeing some of your buyer's journey. So if you have
Hmm.
one product that fits into two different type of campaigns, then you can see like where your product sales came from. So
Hmm.
now you know what marketing angles to take with that specific product, and you can start to create more of what works.
Yeah, for sure. And even thinking about like my own business, I might be promoting, I have a new opt-in and I'm getting ready to have a whole new podcast series and I'm going to have this specific opt-in that I want podcast listeners to opt in because I want to know who's listening to my podcast.
Yeah.
So I can use that original link in several different places, but in the podcast show notes, we can put the one that has the UTMs for podcast listeners. And then I can see, okay, let's say 50 people have opted into this newsletter series. 45 of them came from the podcast show notes, and maybe five came from somewhere else. But then it gives you that information.
Yeah, I mean, and then you could even create UTM links for wherever you're sharing that initial link so that when you go to look at this campaign, like holistically, you can see, cool, this really worked on Instagram, or this
Mhm.
really worked in some of my networking groups, or, wherever other places you want to
Yeah, for sure.
share it.
So, one of the caveats that you share is to not use UTM links when linking internally. What do you mean by internally versus externally? And why is that like strip down your UTMs if you use them internally?
Yeah, so internal links are when you're linking from like blog post A to blog post B. So internally on the website that you own. You can think about it that way. External links are anywhere else that you would share your link, like Instagram, in your emails, in Facebook groups, things like that. And what happens is the last click. So, like if someone visited blog A from Instagram with a UTM link, and then you put a UTM link on blog B and they click on it, it removes blog A's UTM link. So then it
Oh,
just looks like they
okay.
came from blog A when really they came from the gram.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful
Yeah.
because so then that way, if they click from blog A to blog B, they're just going from your website to your website. But now we've learned that they came to your website from Instagram.
Yeah. And there are other ways that you can look at like how people are moving along your pages. So there are other resources to do that because that is also really interesting and important information to know.
Yes. I mean, I think from a web design perspective, that is so important to know because you want to understand the customer journey. You want to understand the user experience. And you and I were talking about this before we hit record, but like marketing helps you get to the website. But then what happens once they're there? Because we don't want to spend a ton of time and energy and effort on campaigns, content, ad spend that drives them to the website. And then literally nothing is happening because there's an issue with the
Yeah.
customer experience or something in the web design. And I get it. Like web design is expensive, but it is expensive because just like building a house, you need to do it right in order for
Mhm.
it to do its job.
100%. I also don't think it's ever done. So, like, I don't think that when you build a website, you're like, okay, easy peasy, I'm done. I think that there's always, like, based on your customer journeys and your heat mapping and the data that you have, you're always going to continue to make iterations.
That is the number one thing that I wish someone had told me when I started a website, that you'll never be done with this. You
Hmm.
have no idea how much time you will spend tweaking and changing and updating your website. And I think about clients that I talk to or potential clients or just people in my network, they're like, oh yeah, my website's not updated. Oh my gosh, like that's such an important piece of real estate. Like let's get in there and update it. And again, we could have a whole nother podcast on this, but people who hire developers to do things for them and then they don't know how to do it themselves and they don't allocate a budget to keep a developer available to help them, and then that
Yeah.
website becomes like your grandma's kitchen with avocado cabinets that it's too much to change it and fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important to know how to make those small tweaks on your website. Maybe you don't know how to do all the things, and that's okay, but like changing the wording, changing the color, just those little small things, definitely need to know how.
Yes,
But again, I
absolutely.
totally agree with you. That could be like I could get on a soapbox and rant about that too.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so let's wrap up with one action step a business owner can take today. And I would love to hear a tip for somebody who is DIYing their marketing, like they're in the weeds, they've got their hands in the stuff, they're doing it. And then maybe a tip for somebody who is at that CEO level, they've got a marketing team or they're thinking about a marketing team where they're just leading and they want to make sure that they're being a savvy CEO and asking the right questions.
Yeah, cool. So if you're doing it yourself, my tip for you is just make sure you have your Google Analytics installed. It's free. And start using UTM links, which are also free, so that you can see which of your marketing experiments are working. So get those installed and start experimenting. For the savvy CEO, my tip is to take time to review your data. So the facts that you have inside your Google Analytics, but also like think about your feelings. I think a lot of times we forget that we're humans because we're like running this business and we're robots. But when you look at your facts and your feelings and you take time to iterate on what's working for you, then you can stop spending time on things that you don't enjoy or that don't drive your business, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think having worked with CEOs that are not marketers and many clients that I talk to, they're like, whoa, I did not start this business to be a marketer. Like, I don't want to deal with this stuff. I don't want to think about it. What I find is people in that camp tend to make all their decisions based upon their gut or how they think as a customer. But if you are not your customer, you need the data to help you make decisions. And that's one of the things that like will like grind my gears when somebody's like, "Well, I don't like this or I don't like that." I'm like, "But you're not the customer and you paid me and hired me to market to the customer. So what is the data telling us about what is going on with the customer?"
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, this was a great conversation. We are going to link Rebecca's blog post in the show notes if you want to read in detail and follow along her tips. We've got that linked in the show notes. And then I will also link that Google UTM builder for you. So you've got it right there and you can take a look at it. But before we wrap up, I have got a couple questions to ask just to get to know you a little bit better. And I would love to know first is what is one of your brand values and how did you land on that?
Okay, cool. So, one of my brand values is nuance and duality. And I landed on it because I think it's so important to consider our humanness as we're building businesses. And I just wanted to make sure that my clients understood that I was going to consider their lived experience when we're working together.
I love that so much. And that is a brand value that I have never heard before, but is so important. So congratulations on originality. And I think you do a really nice job of sharing that in your content. You share nuance, you understand duality, and you have that compassion for people. So I could definitely see you
Thank
living that.
you. That's such a nice compliment. I
Yeah.
appreciate
And
it.
then one of our brand values at the Consistency Corner is personal development. So I always love to ask our guests to share a favorite personal development book or podcast, or if you're like me and you can't pick a favorite, something that you've read or listened to recently that's really resonating.
Okay, cool. I was thinking about this and I couldn't pick a favorite, but I'll share two. So, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy is one of my favorites. The book is really dog eared. And when you asked that question, it really reminded me I'm going to go get that book. I'm going to dig it out of where it is and I'm going to read it again. And then the second person who I really enjoy all of his books is Daniel Pink. I think that he also does a really good job of like marketing with a human perspective.
Very cool. Very cool. My husband would probably like me to stop asking this question because literally every time I ask it and I get a new book to add to my to read list, and he's like, you could finish one of the 8 books that you're currently reading before
Like,
we add more books to the
no,
list.
mind your business, sir.
Right, right. I'm like, how can I create a business for myself, a job, a way to make money where I can just sit and read books all day? Like that's
When you tell me, I need to know.
yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Well, our last question is I would love to know something that you are really consistent with, either in your business or your personal life. And I'll share my gentle reminder for everybody that consistent doesn't have to mean constant.
Yes. Okay. So learning. I'm a lifelong learner, have a very, very curious soul. I'm constantly asking questions and then reading about things that are just interesting to me, whatever that might be. So I think that applies both to my personal life and my business.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much again for sharing your tips with us today. Let us know, if where do you hang out on the internet? Where can people connect with you? And we'll be sure to link that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, if you'd like to learn more about marketing measurement, you can find my blog at threegrovesmarketing.com. If you'd like to chit chat, you can find me on Instagram at threegroves. And if you'd like some help getting started measuring your marketing and you don't just quite know where to start, you can download my free marketing measurement playbook, which will help you do just that. And that can be found at threegrovesmarketing.com/MMP.
Okay, awesome. We'll put all that on the show notes. And again, Rebecca, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.